Geez, that's a very complicated way of starting the interview because of the fact that, I'm at a point where, because we always reinvent ourselves. Today if you say, what else we want to do apart from internal audit? I don't know.
One of the greatest things for me about AFIIA is probably our perspective changes. We're learning something new because we're seeing it from different perspectives.
We need to work on the issue of supporting other affiliates, that we can't just grow on our own. It's going to catch up with us at some point.
Fellow internal auditors, welcome to our INbrief podcast. My name is Prishani Nundkisun. Internal auditors, I hope that you are ready for a fantastic session with no one other than Tshepo Mofokeng, the chairman of the IIA SA Board. Tshepo, are you as excited as I am for this podcast?
Well, I'm happy to be here with you this afternoon, Prishani. Good afternoon.
Fantastic. We are so excited to have you. We see posters of our board members. We hear about our board members, but we never get an opportunity such as this to really just have a moment with you. And today we're going to have a few moments with our chairman. So Tshepo, tell us briefly about the journey of the boy Tshepo, who became the man who is the chairman of the IIA SA. We would like to know a little bit more about who is sitting with us today.
Geez, that's a very complicated way of starting the interview because of the fact that, I'm at a point where, because we always reinvent ourselves, we move from one era to the next. But briefly, I know many people don't believe it. I grew up in Soweto.
Wow.
And I went to school in the township when I started. And I went to a private school when I was in high school, and then I went to varsity at Wits. And how my journey probably of internal audit started, it came actually as I think it was by accident I bumped into this profession. I even remember this day vividly as to what was happening. We were sitting in class and we had this accounting teacher who was actually talking about, what do accountants do? And he said, no, these guys, especially CAs, they work in a stock exchange. The stock exchange back then was in Diagonal Street. So obviously, people get a sense that I went to high school back in the 90s. So, and just because of that, I became intrigued to be saying, what is this accountant issue about? And eventually, but for some odd reason, I think when I left that class that day, I was like, no, I really want to be an accountant. Like at it, I finished matric, went to varsity. I had to do a 4-year degree because I did not have a good matric maths pass rate. But I gave a determination, said to must do accounting. I finished my accounting. I was doing the CA stream, I finished it. 5 years later, I had my what they call CTA now. It's called BAC in my varsity. And I joined one of the big 4 firms to do articles then. Went to Board 1. I went through Board 1, easy right. Board 2 came. Board 2 said, no, you gotta stop here, paid and course. I think that's when then I then got to then be taken to internal audit. And obviously at the time, internal audit was kind of limited. It was not as big as it is today. I mean, you'd even battle. I'm trying to think with my clients. I don't remember a client which had a chief audit executive at the time that you're auditing. You'll know that not every auditors, but in the main, it was not a big issue. And then up until, so battling with these board exams, then I came across a company that was looking for internal auditors. And like be it, actually, this company, Centec, and then they were starting a new unit. But the funny thing is that nobody else in that company knew how to do internal audit. So it was a finance person, you're all moving into the internal audit, and then I started studying when I went there studying internal audit, and then I qualified to be a CIA as well. And so once I think I got into being introduced to internal auditing, my outlook changed in life, and how I viewed what my purpose and calling was changed. And also I then realized that, the stopping that I had, it was like, no, you need to stop here because you need to follow a different profession that is catered for you, not where you want to go. Because then, then my career then grew at even a faster pace. I rapidly did things that, sometimes like, I don't know how come I did that when I was 30, when people only do that when they're 45 and 50. And so that's when then my journey of internal audit, that, I even got to be senior management internal auditing when I think I was just under 30 years old. And I just was now like, I had such a big learning curve, but I had to learn how to do all the working papers, how to reference, how to read findings, how to make the step work. And eventually then that my love grew, and I then fell in love with the profession that, today if you say, what else would you want to do apart from internal audit? I don't know. But all I know is that where I am now is that internal audit changed lives. Hence, when you talk trusted advisors and you talk change agents, that's what I feel that's what CAEs must be about more than anything, any other thing, over and above understanding the standards and that. But you need to be looking at a problem and say, how do we change this particular issue for the organization, but also for the country and the world? Because I think these issues are all interrelated.
Wow. Tshepo, this is exactly why we're having this podcast, because now in less than 5 minutes, we have just uncovered so much more of your story. And I know that there are internal auditors sitting there that could be from a similar place, that could have bumped into audit by mistake, like many of us have that story. But thank you for sharing those honest, true parts of your history and your background. Internal audit changes lives. What a powerful statement. I myself have been in internal audit for 14 years now, and I know that with every audit, with every engagement, with every interaction, we are making a difference. And it's not always easy, but we are there to make that difference. One of the differences that you have been making as chairman of the board of the IIA SA is that you are also part of a conference that many of our auditors might not have actually heard of. And that is the AFIIA, the African Federation of Institute of Internal Auditors. And can you give, for those that are listening today, some understanding of how it started and why did it actually start?
Thank you for that question. So AFIIA started back in 2008. And I think there was just a need for auditors in the continent to collaborate, to share ideas, to share knowledge, but to probably also one common voice around a number of issues. And as you probably understand that in the continent, especially our country, we've got a lot of interrelationship from a business point of view, but also mobility to do all different kind of things. And so it just became an easier route for, that we then have a similar set of kind of corporate values. That internal audit was one of those. So that's how the federation actually came about. But also because we belong to that global body, and currently now even the global body, which is IIA Inc., prefers to work through federations. The federations of the people in Europe, of the people in South America, in Oceania, and I think the people in the Middle East. So there's different federations to cater for the different regions that we have across the globe. So that because of the fact that when you go according to the different continents, they share a number of things, including language, including culture, including a lot of other things. So it becomes a bit easier when people organize in that way. They're able to do business together, but also be able to share knowledge and skills.
That actually makes a lot of sense to me, and I've definitely learned something today about AFIIA. If you look at the mission, the vision, and the objectives of AFIIA, do you find that it relates to what's happening with the IIA SA?
Definitely, yes. And I'll give you a typical example. So if you look, and something that we never actually maybe get into is that sometimes when we look at things from a point of view of saying, it's only my issue. So when we were in Ghana last year, we met people who are auditors for some of the financial service companies who are headquartered in our country. And they talk about how they attend online training provided by a Standard Bank, an FNB, an ABSA, and Nedbank, who are all headquartered here, but they do business in the rest of the continent, same as telcos and retail companies. And so then what then AFIIA, from a practical point of view, does, it then tries to level the playing field, that now we all now understand certain elements of governance in the same way, but also bridges to be saying, how do we then collaborate better? Because if you've got a stakeholder like an MTN, which has got business in over 10 different African countries, and you talk about it as auditors from the whole continent, the conversation becomes a bit different, but also the level of how you then say the controls must be maintained become different and more uniform across the different countries where they operate. So it's from that point of view that this issue of the stakeholder engagement gets a bit amplified and gets a bit, heightened in terms of how we look into it. But similarly, then auditors are able to collaborate better so that the standards of the profession is maintained.
And just by listening to you, I can hear that vision of one voice coming through in everything that you are saying. And that is fantastic. And I can just imagine, we talk about it verbally, but I can just imagine the atmosphere when that collaboration actually takes place. I mean, Africa is such a powerful continent, and I have no doubt that being at that conference alone, it must really be something fantastic. Tshepo, as a member, how does AFIIA impact me as a member?
AFIIA impacts everybody because you'd understand. Okay, so let's maybe paint the picture, and you see how AFIIA affects you or affects us. So unlike all the other professional bodies that you probably have in the country, which are kind of localized, we belong to a global professional body. So from a global professional body, then when you go to regions, then you are able then to get to a point where you as a member are able to say, I'm in the rail industry, and I know that they build a new rails in Kenya, for example, and there's auditors working on this thing. I can collaborate and gain understanding how they audited this part and how they added value. Or you actually go and say, I want to do a study around how in Lesotho they look at the issue of their now infrastructure development around issues of dams and water, and that because they kind of probably still starting out on some of these things. And so these are the kind of things that members would actually benefit out of, to say, now we know more about what we do. So I'll give you typically, when we're auditing one of the big SOEs, one of the issues that we had was to say, if we were to expand the rail industry in the country, because they're in logistics, obviously you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Your routes will be limited if you don't know the infrastructure of the other African countries, right? Because then they do rails and ports, and these are integrated logistics businesses. So you want to know as to how the other countries are doing from a competitive point of view, so that you can then up your skills, but to be able for auditors to then refine their recommendations to be more insightful and actually add business value. So it just actually add your knowledge enhancement, but also it makes you be a global leader and a global internal auditor, if we're going to put it that way, to say when you collaborate with others, you actually get more out of what you do at work.
That's brilliant, and it's actually become an enabler for so much of collaboration, which is actually so exciting. We were talking offline, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's then the 10th AFIIA conference that's going to be taking place. That is incredible. And you can't always put down on paper what would happen at conferences like this, the interactions and what actually comes out of it, I think is absolutely brilliant. Tshepo, tell me, does AFIIA open a door of collaboration with IIA affiliates in Africa? And explain the benefits of that to our auditors who are listening.
So there's a number of doors that AFIIA opens up that we need to collaborate on. And also we need to probably look at this AFIIA relationship from a point of saying, the countries are never the same in terms of governance models, are never the same in terms of the governance culture, are never the same in terms of the number of CIAs that we've got across. So, for example, then we get to a point and say, if, let's say, one of the countries needs to probably understand how we train our CIAs, they call on us and then we assist them with that kind of things. I mean, one of the other things that has come, we had to share our PIA training with one of the countries, because I wanted to know how we actually do it, because there's a skills problem.
Okay.
But also you find that on our side, when we do the risk in focus report, then you're able to know, so in a country like Gabon, they battle with this and that and that. In Ghana, they battle with this and that and that. So that is how you are able then to see the benefit around it. But also it then allows us to say, as different institute, how do we also empower the others to get to a point where the same level? I mean, just the other time, one of the discussions we had was that we were called upon, and Tabis was the one who was actually doing this presentation, to say, as a country, how do you manage your membership? And you are sharing, we've got this system, we do that. So because of sharing those, then you actually know, they battle in this way, but they've got something else that we don't have, that we actually learn from them. So it's that kind of a partnership issue that we've got. And I've got countries where they've managed to deal with corruption better than we would have.
Yes.
And when you learn from those things, you're actually amazed at the kind of things which are happening elsewhere in the continent.
I was actually just going to say the same thing. We often engage in a relationship with someone thinking it's one way, and actually we have no idea how much we sometimes receive. So I imagine that with AFIIA, there's so much of give and take. But what I'm also hearing, Tshepo, is that there's so much of efficiency in having this platform where you can exchange these ideas. And for me, it is just bringing a dynamic platform, because we live in such an ever-changing world. Africa is no different to that. And this is definitely such an incredible place where these exchanges in information can happen. We hear about networking, we think it's an old term, but it's such a real term. I can just imagine the exchange of information, the exchange of context that actually happens, which is incredible. Do we need to be members of AFIIA for us to benefit from it as members? Can you enlighten us, Tshepo, on the membership?
Well, remember that the membership of AFIIA, because of a federated organization, so the affiliated members is IIA South Africa. Obviously, because it is made out of members, so those members become members of AFIIA. Similarly with the global body, that because we are affiliated with the global body, we are automatically members of that body. So therefore, but then it does, because then we work on. So some of the things we're working on where members maybe can see some of the values is when we've got things like what AFIIA has got now, it's webinars.
Awesome.
Where we can say there's a webinar they're talking about maybe, let's say, the issue of, I'm trying to remember, there was this, in Kenya, they had this, just forgot the name of it, but the e-wallet type of a thing, that where they're trading on that, where it did not do as well in our country because of, we've got a different financial system, but it was more And there were learnings that we can learn for us to then, that's how we have probably got to have Inside Imali and e-wallet and the other cash sends. But so with those kind of webinars, then they allow our members to have insight into things that they might not know about, because then other thing that we actually see is that once we don't interact with auditors from different jurisdictions, we sometimes don't understand the context in which they are working from.
Sure.
We don't even understand some of the cultural issues that they have, which also affect how we actually conduct business and how we also look at risk and how we do things. And so as a result, some of these things, these interactions, when you interact with the people, then it even affects and changes how you are thinking about certain things. Because now you can say, oh, I used to look at this thing from a paper point of view, listen to people on TV, but when I'm talking to real people, they're sharing with me real stories, I understand better what happens.
And we said in our previous podcast, sometimes there's only so much you can read. Yes, leaders are readers and you get great information out of it, but nothing beats that human interaction. And so I can really picture you in this conference and picture our members at these webinars connecting, collaborating, getting more information. Tshepo, before I get onto more formal questions, what does it feel like to be at an AFIIA conference? What have you personally experienced that you could share with us? Help us to almost feel like we are there.
I think the first thing I'm just probably going to say is that it actually then even get to a point where you're saying, when you go to a conference, you take a clean page, because how they conduct conferences, there's elements which are different from what normally would happen. So in their case, all the time, the conferences are either opened by a deputy minister, a minister, or DG of finance.
Oh, wow.
Right? Without fail, or there'll be either a speaker of parliament or delegate in the when we actually open the conference. So therefore, is that kind of a thing. But also you find that there's always speakers from all different countries who've got all different perspectives about how things work in life. But also you find that the clothes that people wear, as an example, they just bring in the multifaceted cultures of the continent.
Yes.
One says, no, but I'm no longer just in Johannesburg or in Cape Town. Now I'm in Abidjan or I'm in Ghana, or I'm in another country, because of the fact that it also brings that element of that. But also then you learn about how they approach certain things, which differs from how we approach them in our country. So when you get there, you just must say, I'm here to learn.
I love that. I love that. I've had the privilege, because of auditing, to visit so many of our African countries. And I love your advice. I think it's such a pearl of wisdom to say, go there with that blank page. Be ready to learn, because if you're going to go there with expectations, you're either just going to have a serious culture shock, or you're just going to close yourself off to learning. So I absolutely love that. There is so much to take from our colleagues in the other African countries. And there's so much to give. I mean, there's certainly perceptions about South Africa as well, that when we get to speak and meet with them, that we can also share what is happening in our country versus perhaps what they are always seeing in their news. I know when I visit other countries, it's always interesting when you're sitting in that hotel room and you switch on the news and you see your South Africa from the eyes of another country. So no, I really love that. I also love what you're saying about just the culture, what people are wearing, what they are speaking about. One of the greatest things for me about AFIIA is probably our perspective changes. We're learning something new because we're seeing it from different perspectives. I think very often if we just stick to who we know, what we know, we're not going to get that broader perspective. And you mentioned earlier about the types of recommendations that we give business. And if you are connecting and collaborating with different people in Africa, you're having that opportunity to get those great recommendations, getting things that are relevant that makes sense to businesses in Africa doing what they are doing. So thank you for sharing that. And I think we definitely have auditors out there who are going to be clicking away in their searches, trying to understand what is this AFIIA, how do I get involved, maybe how can I get involved in a webinar. So that is fantastic. Now, AFIIA has been there for 10 years. We have been engaged. We have learned from our colleagues in Africa. Where to from here? You have said in your first question, Tshepo, that your life has changed. It's been dynamic. It's not the same as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. What is to say of AFIIA? Where does it go from here? And how do you compare that to where maybe IIA SA is going, maybe IIA Inc. is going?
Okay, let me probably say this and just about the AFIIA part, to be saying the one thing that we need to be proud, especially our members, guys, let's travel more into the continent so that we get to appreciate how things are done elsewhere in the continent, but also even in other jurisdictions, so that we then get to also see how systems work, to see how systems can also, maybe it was not working when you were there 2 years ago, when you go 5 years later, the system works well. So where AFIIA is going at this particular point in time, so the one issue we're looking for is to strengthen the education system across the board. Obviously, even in the country, we still have to kind of, I wouldn't say professionalize, but to have the common standard of entry into the profession, so that then we are able to say, when you get to this level, now you're an internal auditor, you can do, so that, we produce similar, skilled and competent auditors with the same level of NQF level qualification, if you do put it, and with the same education curriculum, right? So even the continent is the same thing they're doing. But secondly, there needs to also acquire the global certifications.
Yes.
And you've seen that probably in the last 2 or 3 weeks that we had a number of people, especially in the other African countries, who attained CIAs, even including in our case. So that is another issue that we're actually working on. But number 3, we need to work on the issue of supporting other affiliates, that we can't just grow on our own. It's going to catch up with us at some point. So we need that when we hit 20 million in terms of number, probably the continent must have on its own, have the 80, then we bring our 20, then we get to 100,000 members. And that is, for me, one of the things that I think we need to focus and push on. But also we need to then solidify this voice to say, as a continent, we've got unique needs. We've got a unique way of doing things. And so as a result, when we go to a global body and deal with African continental issues, they are done in a way where we are all on the same page. We all understand things in the same way, and we all aspire for the same or similar things, so that the profession can actually go. But lastly, the other thing that we also trying to work around is to say, different countries are at different levels in terms of their internal audit reputation. And obviously, in our case, we've got legislation in the public sector, and we've got the King report on the private sector to close the gap where internal audit gets a platform at the right table. But we need to probably share these models, but also make them continental global models, so that they apply across, so that everybody can then enjoy the same benefits and freedom of being an internal auditor.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Tshepo. Tshepo, I've spent many years auditing in Africa. And for a young auditor who catches a flight from South Africa and goes to Botswana, goes to Ghana, goes to Zambia, goes to Zimbabwe, or any place in Africa, the truth is it can be quite daunting. You never know what to expect on the other side. And AFIIA would be a great enabler for us. And my simple question to you is, as a member of the IIA, how would I even join AFIIA? Do I need to email the Institute of Internal Auditors? How do I actually become a member, or am I already a member?
Well, remember, because we are already we are already an affiliate of AFIIA. So by you being a member of the IIA South Africa, you're already a member of AFIIA. So therefore, if you are an auditor who audits if you audit a company which has got different subsidiaries or divisions across the continent, and you were to learn in there, then you've got auditors who are able to assist you and guide you in things that you are stuck with, from something as simple as saying, how do you guys report when you get to your board meeting? How do your report get to be appreciated? What are the red flags to look at? So that would be the kind of support that you have. So therefore, but that also then says we then need to work on webinars around then sharing knowledge. Then you can know what other people are doing in other countries that you might want to go and to work in. But also similarly, that's why then allows us to also collaborate with our own South African embassies based in the different countries, so that, it becomes easy for you when you go to a country to say, these are the following steps that you must actually follow for your period there to be a bit easier.
No, definitely, because I think as auditors, we have so many things to think about, and this feeling of not knowing what to expect would be greatly alleviated by an opportunity such as that. Tshepo, so we've mentioned these differences that we find in the rest of the African countries. I thought it was so interesting that you brought up the regulation or the guidance that uplifts internal audit in South Africa that is not always mirrored in other countries. Is there a research center or a research hub where we are almost centralizing that knowledge at the moment with the IIA, so that an auditor could log in or know that there's a central place where they can get that information? Are we there yet, Tshepo?
We are getting there. So one of the things that we're working between IIA South Africa and AFIIA and IIA Global is to have an Africa Research Center. We're still trying to work on the modalities, how that, what that would happen, how that would look like. Then people can then write different documents and then post them onto that research center. So you had a number of engagements around that issue, how will it work out? Because there's a lot of documents out there, but they're just not organized for us to be able to access them and achieve them and work on them. And one of the benefits of AFIIA then was to actually then allow us to do that, because we could not do it on our own.
Of course. And we look forward to that. I have colleagues who are always traveling into Africa, and even not just physically traveling, but engaging with our colleagues in the rest of Africa. And I think a platform like this, a research center like this, would just do wonders. What I'm hearing about AFIIA is that it's there so that we don't reinvent the wheel. It's there so we don't start from scratch. I know as auditors, the one thing we really don't like is to always have to start from scratch. So I appreciate that this is going to allow us the opportunity to start with a research platform, start with knowledge that has been documented and shared. So we definitely and really look forward to that. I would like to ask about your role, Tshepo, at a conference. Do you attend just as an attendee? Have you gone as a speaker? And on that point, once conference is over, how do you engage then with, say, the delegates or the members of AFIIA? What is your ongoing engagement? What does that look like for Tshepo?
Remember that, when I go to the AFIIA conference, I don't normally go wearing my own jacket. I go to the conference to represent members. So over and above, let me probably share with you what then would happen at a conference. So you would then have the global team and the members of the board, including the chairperson or whoever. And this time around, actually, it's going to be probably 60% of the board would be there. The global CE and his team would be there. So then what we also then have in between it's just discussions on some of the matters we are talking about, that we need to collaborate on these issues. We must assist each other on these issues. We need to contribute towards this particular issue. So those are kind of issues that we keep on then working around and say, how do we make things a bit better for everybody else? Who is that? Because also that on the last day normally of the conference, then we'll have the AFIIA general committee meeting, general meeting, to look as to what then is the program of AFIIA of the coming year.
Okay.
So there's a lot that we do around the conference, more than just being in a conference and speaking. So that's why we actually go to this, because we need to listen. We need to also put in our voice and say we want to see this particular kind of a thing. So one of the issues that you probably know now is that we've got a PCIA,
Yes.
which is a unique South African concept. It actually came out of these conferences to say, we've got people who've got PIA and they've got CIA. What do we do with them?
Yes.
And we're like, okay, we can create one qualification to be a PCIA. But it's a unique South African concept that also is still trying to sell it maybe to other people in the continent who might want to be part of the program, especially those who actually prefer to still, who like the whole model of PIA, because it's elevating the quality of skills, but also the competencies that we've got as a country.
And that's fantastic to understand. Tshepo, if I attend IIA conference South Africa in August, and then I attend AFIIA maybe a few months later, what difference am I going to feel between the two conferences? Apart from connecting with my other African colleagues, what would you say is the differentiator between the two conferences?
Well, firstly, the one is in Centre, the one is elsewhere.
We love to travel, Tshepo. We love to travel.
So that's the first differentiator. But the other thing is that the difference becomes that our conference would normally focus on the issues that we normally have. But you'll find that when you hearing somebody talk about ESG, from a continental point of view, it sounds a bit different from ESG in South Africa, because of the fact that then when you go to the continent, other countries are suffering from diseases, are suffering from an element of drought. There's now different dynamics. The climate probably has changed a bit differently. So it's those kind of things you look at. The same as when you look at the issue of how people deal with anti-corruption. You will be amazed some of the laws that other people have got to deal with, money laundering and corruption and those kind of things. So therefore, it's that kind of a thing. Or also, when you look at cybersecurity, and you think that but the country most targeted is South Africa. You actually become amazed if you say, no, it's because they do things differently. That's what I want targeted in the main. So it's a lot of unique different things that you learn, or when you understand how they do the double currency trade.
Yes.
Where in South Africa, everything is rands.
Yes.
But you find that it's in kwacha and dollar. It's dollar and another, and like thinking, how do you guys do this conversion of using money interchangeably? So it's a lot of those kind of dynamics. Or you also then listen about how they do their recruitment strategies for internal audit. It gives you a different view and a different appreciation of what you do. But also, then remember that when are you looking at people going to AFIIA and going to our conference, people go to a global conference as well.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you look at the global conference, the national conference, the AFIIA conference, they all have got 3 different selling propositions, depending where you are in your career, depending the industry you are in, depending your outlook in life, you can pick and choose as to whether I want to go to that conference, or you can go to all 3 if you've got the appetite and the time.
I don't know if you are excited, but I'm excited. And I wish this podcast took place 10 years ago. But be that as it may, we are now learning and growing together. I'm truly appreciative of what we are hearing today. yes, I do wish we had heard it sooner, but we are hearing it now, and let's do something about it. We have a question actually from one of our internal auditors. And the question is that many of us work for companies that are branched outside of South Africa. So if I'm in an audit, I'm in Kenya for the audit, can I walk into IIA SA Kenya and ask for technical advice on issues that I cannot understand? Do we have an open door policy in Africa when it comes to IIA SA? What is the sense? What is the feeling? How do we engage? And Tshepo, it's at the level of how do I even find a contact? Where would I find the email for someone in IIA SA Kenya? And would they be willing to engage with me as a member as easily as they would engage with you as a chair?
Yes. If you go to any IIA offices in the continent, they are willing to engage with any member. The only thing is that you must actually say, I am Tshepo, I'm from South Africa, I'm here for an audit, I need audience with the administrators in the office, I've got these other questions, and then they can assist you with that. The contact details are always available in our offices at the institute here. So if you wanna connect with anybody, or you've got any other issue, we are able to actually assist you to be in contact with those people. It's a very easy process.
That's fantastic. And I think that's fantastic news for many of our listeners. And I have no doubt that someone listening to this podcast is going to actually make a decision to use this opportunity that's available to them. So thank you so much, Tshepo, for that. On this point of being free to ask and having the freedom to ask, we have a very important holiday that's coming up in South Africa, which is Freedom Day. And maybe if we step back in this podcast with everything that we have spoken about and zoom into South Africa and understand that we are internal audit professionals in South Africa, what does Freedom Day mean for the IIA SA? And do we commemorate it in some way as an institution?
Obviously, Freedom Day is a South African holiday where you commemorate, basically, I think we're saying, what was, they'll call the injustice of the past, where the playing field was not level. We actually move away from that life. So it's an era that we are saying we are moving away from that era. We are going into a new country, and you're looking at things from a different point of view. And what do we probably need to then do at this particular point in time? So internal audit's a profession. It's a profession. So it comprises of professionals.
Okay.
But professionals live in communities.
Right.
So professionals have got an element, but a responsibility to uplift and upgrade their communities. So as part of our Freedom Day, we need to now contribute towards making a difference, starting with small things. It starts with auditors being on school governing bodies, them doing financials for a necessary school.
Yes.
Them going to look at something they can do at an old age home, but also just probably paying for transport for a neighbor's child, or being able to contribute towards something for a neighbor who's unable to do that for themselves, buying them school shoes. And so those are the things for me that I think as professionals we need to start doing, or the varsity that we come from, and just say, I'm going to be an alumni and I'm going to give a part of either time or my lecturing time, or I'm going to give money to the varsity, because if the more of us do that, the less issues I do believe that we'll complain about in the country. Because the reality is that we can't always be waiting and say somebody must come and give me this, somebody must come and do that. But also let's have ideas to say, how do we improve some of the things that we think are difficult for us to kind of achieve, but also try to somehow influence the country that we we've always aspired to have, because we can still have it. It will just maybe take us a few more years, but we need to get there.
Oh, I absolutely love it. I love it. And, I have a very strong leader in my personal life, in our family's life, that says, don't be sad, just change. and I love that. Freedom Day is a reminder that we have a responsibility. And, it's 30 years of democracy. And I actually want to just stop and, Madiba addressed Parliament, and he said, as a new dawn ushered in this day, the 27th of April 1994, few of us could suppress the welling of emotion as we were reminded of the terrible past from which we come as a nation, the great possibilities that we now have, and the bright future that beckons us. And so we assemble here today and in other parts of the country to mark a historic day in the life of our nation. Wherever South Africans are across the globe, our hearts beat as one as we renew our common loyalty to our country and our commitment to its future. And as I was preparing for this podcast, Tshepo, I read that, and I read the vision and the objectives of the IIA SA, of AFIIA. And it's a good feeling to know that we'll never always have perfection, but we have that spirit in us as South Africans and as Africans to always persevere and to continue and to make things better. No matter how bad they are, we make things better. So I hear what you say about Freedom Day and what the IIA SA is doing and our role as professionals in South Africa. And I think that is fantastic. Thank you, Tshepo.
Thank you.
Tshepo, do you think our profession pre-liberation and post-liberation has changed? And if so, what stands out for you?
That's actually a loaded question, because that would be 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, I did not even know a single auditor.
Tshepo's in the hot seat today.
Now I know lots of internal auditors. And I can say to you, the change that probably I've seen and stand out for me in the profession is just that now internal auditors are taken more seriously, but also their work is more understood. But also I think what we managed to do in terms of being at the forefront of being guardians of governance in a number of forums, that for me has been something to speak, but also that we've now influenced a lot of issues around what people are doing on ICT, what people are doing on cultural change institutions, what people are doing in automations. Those are the things that which have changed how people look at the profession. And we've got a lot of people who've been CAEs who've added value in companies to a point where then the value of audit was demonstrated. It went down to all the financial, social, and environmental indicators.
Definitely. And in the environments I've been in, I can definitely bear testament to that. You actually see, as people are progressing, where they make that choice to invest back into the profession, you can definitely see the impact that has had. Tshepo, you and I are South Africans. You've mentioned our responsibility, especially on Freedom Day and in this 30 years of democracy, that, with leadership and with being leaders, with being auditors, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to go back into our communities and to uplift those communities. On that note, how do we remain responsible citizens in our everyday living as free South Africans? Because we are free, but it comes with a responsibility. And you have answered it to a large extent, but what can you add in terms of how do we remain responsible citizens?
Well, I think when we look at responsibility, we maybe need to kind of practicalize it so that it makes more sense. So to be a citizen, it means that you reside in a particular place. So if you stay in a place, one, you must look after it and make sure that place is always clean, but also you must make sure that the place is sustainable, but also you must make sure that the place is safe for everybody to live in that particular place. So therefore, we become responsible by the choices that we make. That we need to be saying, we're making choices where we are looking at life from a point of view of saying, if we can just try and say, as an auditor, my first consideration is that I need to live a more ethical life. Once you live a more ethical life, then you're able to say, what are the aspects that create that ethical life? Then you actually go and say, there's certain values that I need to have. And the values then lead you to say, then if I live life in this way, then you are able to live a more fulfilling life. But it means that once you are fulfilled and you are able to take care of your environment and for others, your burden of getting to a point where you're saying not free becomes less and less and less and less, because I think being free starts with you feeling free. Before your environment, you're saying, I'm free to be here. And the one thing that we need to have is one, we need to dream big, be assertive, be confident, but also we need to stop being fearful. The one thing that we now learn in the country is that, we are so fearful of just getting your car and driving. But you need to get your point now. I'm going to stop being fearful and just live life to the fullest, because there's so many things to be done in life. Because I do believe once we do that, even the things around you change, but the situation around us as well will eventually change.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Let us stop being so fearful. I attended a course that says fear is false evidence appearing real, and you just reminded me of that concept. Tshepo, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on our podcast. I have no doubt that whether we have a first-year auditor, an intern, a manager, or a CAE, I have no doubt that they have learned something about our chairman, but they've also learned something about AFIIA. They've learned something more about their profession than when they joined this podcast. And that is such a fantastic privilege. Thank you for your time, Tshepo. Thank you for sharing your pearls of wisdom. And I have no doubt you will be joining us in the hot seat again.
I'll definitely do that. I'll still come back. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Fellow auditors, the IIA SA has provided plenty opportunities for you to connect. On the 9th and 10th of May, we have the Public Sector Conference, which is happening at Empress Palace. And on the 15th of April, we have the AFIIA Conference, which is taking place in Arusha, Tanzania. Don't miss out.